It's not the pale moon that excites me, that thrills and delights me. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. It isn't your sweet conversation that brings this sensation. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. When you're in my arms and I feel you so close to me, oh, my wildest dreams came true. I need no soft lights to enhance me if you'll only grant me the right to hold you ever so tight, and to feel in the night the nearness of you. Ti voglio bene, il nipotino. Ciao.
We are here today with the talented Denise Neary, singer, actress, and director extraordinaire, as far as I'm concerned. Denise, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I have a few questions for you for our audience. How did you actually start singing? How did you get involved with music? Now, I know you came from a pretty musical family.
My father's sister was an opera singer, and my father's family was from Abruzzi, and they were all talented. All the men played the piano, all the men sang. Nessun Dorma was every Sunday, and my aunt sang professionally opera. So I'm certain that I got the talent from her. And I always had an absolute love of it and was singing since I was very, very young.
I know that you were Abruzzese, by the way. I had no idea. Yeah, so my father was born in my father was born in Vasto, so yeah. How did you formally train, and where did you do that?
I did study with the same person as Barbara Dever.
Right, okay.
Yes, Woods.
Right.
Woods down in East Camden. I studied with her for, I guess it was a good 4 years. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that, I have two sons that are dancers. I'm going to digress for a second. Mm-hmm. But in dancing, you learn the basics, which is ballet, and then that enables you to do everything else. So at the beginning, she was pushing opera with me. And that's what I studied. But as time went on, I really preferred the musical theater end of it. Mm-hmm. And then obviously these last years, I've done a great deal of cabaret work.
Yes.
And that's who I studied with.
Wow, that's pretty. She's wonderful. She
Sweetheart.
really
We
is.
did The Sound of Music together in high school.
Oh, you got to be
So
kidding! I
that's
did
how I
not know
first met her.
that. That's incredible.
Great.
You've done a wide variety of music. What is your favorite? Is it Broadway, classical Broadway? Is it popular songs? What do you do?
I really like I like anything Broadway, obviously,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
any of it. In my cabaret shows, though, I do a mixture of things. You know, I do a lot of standards,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and you know, I'll do things from different musicals that maybe you might not have heard of.
Okay.
Or seen. So it's really such an array. I've done 12 one-woman shows in various places.
Wow.
So every time it's a show, which I'm writing at the moment, but for a venue that is in Asbury Park,
Okay.
but
Wow.
it's only going to be 25% capacity. They're not going to make
I
more
know.
than I. So, you know, we're struggling, but I keep writing, I keep singing, I keep putting it all together.
That's great.
So, and each one had a theme. So depending upon what the theme was, it just correlated with
Wow.
me.
What is your process? I mean, especially now in your writing and your singing, what is that process? How do you start? What does it start to finish? How do you get into that mode or that grain of either singing or writing? Or I find it, to be honest with you, quite similar to me. I mean,
Yeah, because what it really boils down to is trying to find what the common thread is going to be for the show. The last, really my most fun show was at the Laurie Beachman Theater on West 42nd Street in New York. The title was 59 Encore. I was turning 60, but I was going to say, no, I'm not. So this one being 71, it's going to be a little bit different.
Wow.
With that particular show, I took different phases of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon where I was at that particular moment, I correlated a song to that. So that was just one. Another one quickly was My Life According to Webster. So I used certain words. It was set up like the dictionary.
Right.
I used certain words, and whatever that word happened to be, I would just find a song that suited that for me. I think sometimes, at least for me, in writing a cabaret show and putting it together, you have to draw on the things you know. So I'm not saying that I've had a horrible life, but I've had a lot of rough patches in my life. It's not been easy.
No.
But that makes for good theater. That makes for good writing. That makes for good singing.
Let me ask you this: if you were just sitting back and you were having a martini, who was your favorites? Who was your go-to singer?
Well, I always adored Barbara Streisand.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely adored her. We had, it's very funny. There was just so much in common. She had a son, Jason, who was gay, that has a magnificent voice, as does my son, Jason, have a magnificent voice.
And a talented pianist, by the way.
Oh, well, yeah. He's for every one of my shows, he's my vocal and musical director.
Yeah.
Right now, I just had to talk him for a minute. He's at the Count Basie Theater up in Red Bank playing Smoky Joe's Cafe. So he's busy. But she was the greatest mentor for me growing up. And the other one that I really, really enjoy, and I still do today, and I do a lot of her music, is Linda Eder.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right.
She does some really, really great arrangements.
Yes.
So I would say those two were it for me.
Right. You've had a very interesting career as far as directing also. How do you find directing versus your performing? Is it hard to deal with people, and try and pull things out of them?
I adore directing. I absolutely love it. I took for 5 years when I was directing at a local high school, as you well know, Camden Catholic. And then I used to take in the summer directors' workshops that were put out by one of the publishing houses. I can't remember at the moment. And I had absolutely incredible workshops. Lynn, Miranda's, Alice Ripley, they were just incredible, like as close as I am to you. And the directing aspect, I absolutely love. I do. I love it. I love the creation. I love making someone that may not be so sure draw out of them. Your son Richard, case in point.
I was, I have to tell you the story.
I loved it. You have to tell this story because this is the best.
First off, he came to me and, because your nephew Sam and he were in the same class, and you were casting for Bye Bye Birdie, correct?
Yeah.
So my son comes, now my son never sang a note.
I know.
Never, ever, ever had any interest in it. He wanted to play the guitar, he wanted to go smoke cigarette. He came to me and he said, Dad, he says, you have to teach me a song. I said, song? For what? He says, well, I want to audition for the show. I said, what show? He said, Bye Bye Birdie at Camden Catholic. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, it takes preparation. I said, we have to learn the words. We have to work on it. It's going to take a few weeks to do this. And he said, no. I have 3 days.
I remember this.
And I said, I said, you can't learn this in 3 days. He says, let's try. So I said then, and I even called Mark Anderson and I said, Mark, because Bye Bye Birdie is not one of the things that come off the top of my head. So, so I'm playing the thing and I'm listening to it and I'm saying, oh my God, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. I said, Mark, listen, deal with him. I said, I can't take it. So he's going to I'm going to kill this kid. So, and this is like day 2. So now this is why I have my son. This is here. So he's come to see you and sing for you. And I said, Rich, listen, don't be disappointed. I said, if you don't get it, I said, this is your first try. I said, please don't be dejected. I said, it's a hard road. I mean, people study for many, many, many years and they don't get parts like this. So he comes out and he comes to the car and I said, how did it go? And he just put his head down. He says, I got it. I said, son of a bitch. I said, that whole speech was ruined. But, oh my God.
The sweetest thing of all was when we had the rehearsal and you and Joan and your brother Frank
came, my God, yeah,
standing in that music room, and Richard hit that song that Bye Bye Birdie does, that Conrad does. And the three of you your jaws dropped.
I couldn't believe it.
Looked over at me and he's singing with a full orchestra.
Listen, I don't know how you did it.
That I love.
How did you do it? I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it.
There was a gentleman that I took a director's workshop with, very known, a well-known director, John Carazano, and his philosophy was, and a lot of directors don't follow this, especially when I'm dealing with young people. Give them the reading. Give them what you want done, rather than just say, you can say in the beginning, let's see what you have, but then tell them what you want. And that's exactly what I did with Richard, and he was like a sponge. He was incredible.
I still, to this day, that picture sits with the gold lame suit. I mean, it sits in the music room. It was listen, and I was sitting there, and I have to be honest, I was on the edge of my seat, biting my nails. I wasn't as nervous if I was singing. I wouldn't be that nervous. He was but it was a marvelous production. I
never like to classify anything as just a high school production. I would always say to them, because what I worked with were professionals. My 2 sons were the choreographers.
Right. Of course, right.
They danced professionally, and Jason.
I just said this to Barbara. I said, my father wasn't musical at all. My father couldn't even whistle. He couldn't whistle a tune, had no musical knowledge whatsoever. He loved music, he appreciated, but had no musical background whatsoever.
Right.
He told me one thing, and I just said this with Barbara Dever. I said, I was singing something, and it wasn't a great place to do. I forget what the opera was. He says, I have to tell you something. The music is the same whether you sing it at the Metropolitan Opera or you're singing it where you're singing it. He says, it's still the same music.
Exactly.
So, and I sat there and I said, did that come out of my father? But he was exactly right, because the music doesn't change where you sing it. It's still the same music. And that music, let me tell you something, Bye Bye Birdie is not an easy score.
No,
it's not. And it was so well done. And I was so impressed, because, we had Yates, when we at Southern, and we did the same thing. And let me tell you something. I was so happy that they did that, especially with young kids. I mean, to give them that experience so young makes a total difference.
Absolutely.
And I say this all the time. Teachers like you and Yates, if it weren't for you people standing there and doing that and putting the time in, I would have never had a place in school. I wasn't a sports person.
Right.
I wasn't a genius by any stretch of the imagination, but you gave me us a place to fit in. And if it wasn't for you, or if it wasn't for Yates, the identical situations that. Right. I don't know what I would have done. I really wouldn't know if I would have gone into, maybe by luck, but right. I would have never, had that kind of instruction, at that early age. And it gave us an appreciation. And unfortunately, my thing is the shortage of people like you, because to take your talent, the quality of your talent, into that situation, into a school situation where it belongs, because that's where talent is started. Yes. And, when we used to go to school, you would see a kid carrying a violin, a cello, a flute.
Right.
You see that today. And unfortunately, these kids are so deprived of music, of good music. And you don't know if you're going to find another Nat King Cole. You don't know if you're going to find another Barbara Streisand. I mean, you don't know that until you do it. And, unfortunately, you're a dying breed. And unfortunately.
I know. I try to pass this on. I have 3 grandchildren. One adopted, and special needs. We don't know what's in Atticus' head. And the other one, they all seem to love music, and they love being around Sundays when all the music is happening. Sure. But you're absolutely right. If you don't nurture those things, your children just don't know. No. They don't know. And it breaks my heart for some families that they see no need to expose their children to those things. When you look at it, you're not only talking about music. You're talking about mathematics, because music is mathematics. Absolutely. Music is history. It's science, and they don't get it. People just do not get it. Unfortunately, we don't have Denise Neary in every school, which we need. And the problem is that you can't. People that are against it, there's no changing their mind, because they have absolutely no trouble. You are 100% correct. And, when we were growing up, we grew up in a household where, there were jazz sessions with 5, African-American jazz musicians at our house on a Sunday. And my kids got used to that. They knew my grandson will walk in, and he's 5. He's on a Sunday morning, and he'll say, Alexa, play Sinatra, or
there you go.
Play Tony Bennett, because they're so used to that.
Of course, it's a great gift that you're giving them. I'm a firm believer of tradition, and I lived my whole life doing it. And listen, I'll never be rich doing it, but I don't care, because if we touch one person, exactly. Let's just take my son, and of course, yes, we are because Joni and I are in music, and so on and so forth, and Francesca, you gave them an experience that they'll look back 60 years from now, and they'll say, what a wonderful thing that we did. We had because of you. And
it was my pleasure. I always taught my boys, if you can't go out into the world and make people smile with whatever talent you have not lived. You haven't lived.
I'd say that, I thank Denise so much, not only for her friendship and over these years, and I knew your mom, and from St. Pete, and he's crossed for certain. It's not coincidental. I don't believe that. They crossed for a reason, and I am so happy and honored that you became a panelist in the masterclass.
It's my pleasure. Sunday was wonderful, and you are to be commended, John.
Well, thank you, Denise, and so are you. And I thank you for your talent. I thank you for your gift and your participation, because if we don't have any people like you, our art is going to die soon. So
we're going to just keep on trucking.
That's what I keep saying. Denise, thank you so much, and I love you. I love you.
I
And
love you,
please,
and Joni, and and Francesca, and Richard, and Holly. Please give them my love. And I'm
thank
going
you.
to make it to a Sunday dinner.
Okay, yeah, anytime. Now that, hey, listen, I'm vaccinated. Let's go.
Me too.
I'm ready. Let's do
ready.
it.
Martini's round.
There you
I'll
go.
bring the martinis round.
Thanks again. I love you.
I love
Take
you
care.
too. Ciao, bello.
Ciao, ciao. Stata buona. Bye bye. our guest, mezzo-soprano Barbara Dever.
Hello, John.
Hi.
It's so nice to be here with you, and congratulations on everything with Masterclass.
Thank you very much.
And now we get to tell a little bit of our stories, so that's an exciting part. I was born in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Really?
Yes. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, and then my family moved to Camden, New Jersey when I was 5.
Okay.
I grew up in Camden in the old days, let's say. You know, I went off to college at the time that Camden changed and the city became so devastated. And my family, now we go to church there in the hopes that Camden can rise again. So very connected to some of my roots there.
Sure.
And as you know, Camden was the home of RCA Victor, where many of the greats recorded, John McCormick, Marian Anderson, and so many others recorded right there in Camden at the RCA Victor.
Right.
So I've always been fond of my city, where I spent most of my time growing up.
Sure. Great. Where did you get your education?
Catholic.
Camden you were Catholic. Okay.
Yeah, Camden Catholic High School.
Yeah, my kids, Richie and Francesca, both went to Camden Catholic. From Camden Catholic, where did you go?
So Camden Catholic, and of course did all the shows while I was there, and got this bug, you know, to sing on stage because we had shows every year that were pretty big, you know, spectacles, and we had orchestra and everything. I went off to Quincy College in Quincy, Illinois, and that did not turn out so well. I had a scholarship there. My family was pretty poor, and we didn't have the money to send me off to a better situation for music school. And at the end of the first year, I decided it just wasn't for me at that school. I came home, and my parents, I was the oldest of 4, and they said, well, you've got to get a job and start taking care of yourself. So very quickly, I discovered that, I had been playing the guitar throughout high school, as you know, and singing in the folk masses, which were the craze those days. So I started to travel around the diocese and make little tiny bits of money singing folk masses, teaching kids how to play the guitar. I wrote some songs for liturgies and did a bit to, you know, kind of support myself in that way. I met my husband, Jack Dever, and in fact, met him at Mass while I was singing. And he came up and asked if he could carry my guitar. And first I said no, but the following week I said okay. And, you know, one thing led to another, and Jack and I got married. And when we settled in Pittman, New Jersey, I said to Jack, I think I'd like to go back to school and finish my degree. And I'm 5 minutes from Rowan University, which was then Glassboro State College. So Jack was very supportive, and I thought I'd become a music teacher. By the time, you know, my kids were going off to kindergarten and first grade, I could finish my degree and I could teach. And in going over to Rowan University, I met Eugene Simpson, who was the head of the department at that point. And he heard me sing for an audition, and he said, well, Barbara, I think that you should pursue a little bit more than just music education. You have quite a talent there. And so he drew me into, in fact, he said, I'm not sure you need to be in school. You need to be on a fast track to learning how to sing well if you would like to do this career. And he and I embarked on a friendship. He was my teacher for a few years.
Great man.
Until I moved on, and a great inspiration. He gave me such a wonderful foundation, took me to the Nats and other competitions, and I began winning, and I began to see a little bit more of the, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel as far as if I wanted to have this career, if I worked hard and caught up with everyone else who had gone off to conservatory or finished their degrees, if I studied languages a bit, if I got coaching, if I learned the rep, I could indeed try to move forward. So things went from one to the next, and I studied a little bit in Philadelphia after studying with Dr. Simpson, and I got a job, kind of a roundabout way, to sing Azucena in Virginia.
Wow.
In Norfolk, Virginia, and Peter Mark was the head of the company then. And a friend told me they were looking for an Azucena, and I went to New York and auditioned, and I got the job.
Wow.
And I decided at that point it was time for me to move on and find a different teacher, because the top of my voice wasn't quite functioning well enough, but I knew it was there. That's how I found my teacher that I've been with for now almost 30 years, Mike Warren in New York City. And he helped me bring my voice into, the major fullness that I could realize at the time. And without that, I wouldn't have had the success in Virginia, which led me to having a manager approach me at opening night in Virginia, and I've been with that management ever since.
Wow.
And
That's impressive.
It was a little bit of a different path, but I had to work hard. I had to fill in all the blanks from my home base. I took a lot of lessons. I took a lot of coachings. I went up and down to New York. My mother and my mother-in-law took care of the kids, and the kids heard me singing, learning Omneris and sitting at my piano in my little studio at home. And they were wondering, where's all this going, But years later, when I finally got to sing with Pavarotti on the Live from Lincoln Center, there were my kids, gripping the sides of the seats and holding hands, saying, "Oh, this was what Mom was working toward all this time."
Wow.
A lot of hard work, a lot of working toward the goal with motivation and belief that you can do it. And I will say that my faith was a huge part of it. Trusting in God, that God would lead me to the right doors and open the right pathway for me.
Absolutely.
Of course, it wasn't easy. There were a lot of rejections in auditions. As you know, people will tell you in this business, at the beginning, you may get one job out of every 100 auditions that you do. And you should consider that as being lucky.
Yeah, I agree. One question I wanted to ask before we get any further. Was anybody else in your family musical?
Oh, yes. Well, my mother came from a musical family. They were Pennsylvania Dutch out in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Right. Wow.
And the whole family sang at church. And she had, 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they all sang, and they formed a quintet. So she learned music from a very early age, and she went off to take lessons with her older sister, who actually studied with Clara Case Bowman, who was a famous teacher in Philly at the time.
Yeah.
We're talking a long time ago. Clara Case Bowman taught Nelson Eddy at one point. So when it was time for me to take some lessons when I was in high school, my mom and my dad sent me off to see Clara, who was then in her 80s. And she gave me a wonderful foundation at the beginning too. And she was the one who said to me, "You won't know what your voice is for a long time, because I think you have a special voice. So trying to fit into the peg hole of a soprano coming out of high school, going off to Quincy College, where they said, you're a soprano, it didn't feel good. I didn't have the right training." And then Gene Simpson was the one who said, "I think you can be a poor soprano, or you may just be a dramatic mezzo in the making. And that would be something that's rare and worth pursuing."
Yeah.
So that was like someone opening the door and saying, "Here's your living room, come in and enjoy yourself."
Yeah.
So when I found my rep, after finding my right teacher, and then pursuing and finding my ultimate teacher and mentor in New York City, the rep just started to fall in place. And so then at that point, the business, needed people like me. And, I started covering at the Met, and then I started to get performances. And my first time singing with Pavarotti was because one of my colleagues got sick and couldn't fly and couldn't sing on the Live from Lincoln Center. And, Pavarotti's management called my management and said, "Is Barbara available?" So So that's how sometimes things happen,
Yeah,
and
just
you must
right.
be ready. You
That-
just must be ready.
That was my next statement. And another thing that I wanted, which you mentioned, and I felt the same way, and I think most singers do. Even though you have respect for your teacher, no matter who or how good or what, but when something's not working right. Deep down that something is not just sitting well. Your instincts, I think that as a singer. Your instrument. It's not like the teacher could go in and feel what you're feeling. Young singers, what sometimes happens is that they take what their teacher says as gospel, and what happens, they get frustrated, and that's why a lot of singers do drop out. And I say this respectfully to all the teachers, but when a student comes to you and says that doesn't feel right, there's a reason.
When I sang my folk music, you could hear that, and
Mm-hmm.
I was using a different aspect of my
Sure.
voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Smart singers know when they need something else to add to their toolbox.
Right.
And so you have to have respect for the people that you work with, but also I think smart teachers know when it's time to send a student, especially an extremely talented one, to someone else to get a consultation to find out what's not working right.
Exactly.
And if a teacher is good, they're not going to hold that singer back and make that singer feel like
absolutely.
they owe the world to them.
Right.
It takes a team.
Yeah, sure.
Every
I agree.
singer needs a team around them. A good teacher, a great coach, several other people, that are in the business to hear them, perhaps give them some extra coaching. And many teachers, I think the good ones, will appreciate if another, especially like, let's say, if a dramatic mezzo is working with another teacher who's not a dramatic mezzo,
Right.
and that teacher says, maybe take a couple of lessons with Barbara Dever.
Mm-hmm.
She sang the rep. Let's see what she has to say to you.
Right.
And I would never want to take a student away from someone, but I'd want to give the information that may be helpful.
Sure. Absolutely.
So that's the way we should be working in cooperation.
The fortunate things that we have in master classes that we all, for some uncanny reason, and I think this is just the people that I always circled myself around, were always thinking the same direction. We might say it a different way, but the ultimate goal is to make sure that singer is getting the best advice at that time for them. And
Yes.
I think that we were very successful so far. As now we're opening up internationally. It's a sensitive issue, but when somebody you can't tell somebody that they're doing it right if they're not. And one thing I wanted to ask you, when you were working on that, when you're settling into your own sound, how long of a process was that from the time that you started working in getting into that dramatic rep? How long did it take you to do that?
That's something I haven't thought of. I think I'm going to say probably it would have taken as long as it took me to learn the roles that I needed to learn.
Okay.
Because I had good coaching and I had good teaching. So as soon as I could wrap my head and my voice around the roles.
Okay.
Now, notice, young singers, take notice. I'm saying the roles, not just the arias.
Right.
These days a lot of singers learn an aria or two from an opera and they think, hey, I'm let me go get a manager. You need to know the role. You need to know the demands of the whole night on your breath, your body, and your
Exactly.
sound, and your temperament.
Yes.
So I think, coaching the roles, being led by Martin Rich, who he's now gone before us, but one of the old stalwart coaches at the Met, saying to me, here's your rep, Amnera, Sazucena,
Right.
Santuzza, Ballo. And then having gone to the Met to cover Amneris, that was my first job, covering 13 performances of Amneris at the Met. Then while I'm covering those, I'm being coached by some of the great coaches there. George Darden was one of them, who said, I think you would sing a really good Kostanichka in Yanufa. And
Yanufa, yeah.
I had no knowledge of the role. one afternoon he took the score out and he said, come on, let's just walk through it. And the next season, I was covering Kolstanichka in Yanufa.
And that's in Czech,
I
correct?
tell the young singers, you can think you have a role perfected, even a Mozart role, and you go off to another city to sing it, especially in Europe, and you have a coach who says, no, I'm sorry, that's not right. You have to be open to look at it. We are never finished products.
Right.
That's the great thing about this art form, is that there's always another layer of the onion to peel back and find the wonderfulness of how your voice functions with the music of the masters,
I agree.
I learned a lot more about Amneris 4 years after I debuted it than I did when I debuted it.
Sure.
Luckily. Otherwise, we'd be bored, right? We would say, been there, done that. Why should I keep doing it?
Yeah. I always say that the role should evolve, and you do it as a person. So why wouldn't your musicality and your idea of a character do the same? Our opinions change. I think that you've had a unique career. Not often you come from a teacher and go to get in that success in that short a time. Never, the many years that I've listened to you, I can never say that I didn't like that. I didn't think that you should do that. You were a very, very intelligent singer. You knew your voice. You knew what to do, when to do it, and you were a wonderful actress. I can't tell you how many performances I've seen. And not only the one with what I call him Cool Hand Luke, but even with Placido, I was always impressed. How do you feel that character? I mean, do you find, because not every character fits our personality?
That's true.
So how do you find the good things or the things that work with you? How do you determine that process?
Well, I think first of all, the overarching thing is trust the music.
Okay.
I think many times nowadays we're trying to fit ourselves into characters or interpretations. Trust the music and trust that the character has been laid out before you in the music of these genius master composers.
Yes.
And swim in it and discover things and be creative on your own time. After you learn the music, sit with yourself and say, and how does that make me feel when I say that and when I sing that line and when Manrico says this to me? How does that really make me feel? Right. I don't always want a director to tell me how to feel.
Exactly.
I want to figure out how I feel, and I want to go there to the rehearsal with an idea of how that makes me feel. And I often say to young singers, have a backstory, have a secret about your character,
right?
That only you know.
Wow.
And you can go there, and you could be singing something that you've memorized and and the director has told you go here, stand there, and blah blah blah, and you could be thinking about something totally opposite, that you've planned this beautiful picture and artistic landscape of what you're thinking about, and the director could say, well, that's genius. What I told you to do is genius. And you say, yes, it's absolutely genius. I can't believe how I feel. Now, I must say, I have to say, I've loved all the directors that I've ever worked with. But one of them actually taught me that secret and said, go ahead, make it up, because you've got to have something inside that lives and breathes when a director tells you then what they want to layer on top of that.
Yes. Another question: if you were going to listen to a role, say you wanted to listen to theirs, who were your go-to singers that you would listen to? Your mezzo, or just in general, who was your go-to singer?
Well, in the times that I was learning the roles like that, I would have listened to Barbieri, of course, Cosotto.
Oh yeah.
Shirley Verrett sang it.
Yes.
It wasn't one of her favorites, but I would say those two, and of course Dolores Zajic was singing it at the Met at the time. She had made her her big debut, and she was owning
Right.
that role at the
Sure.
time.
Sure.
But listening to many different singers and then garnishing from each one
Exactly. Yeah.
what you identified with and what you might not identify with.
I think that we were talking about this before, and I think in a master class and with a few other singers, that the problem with younger singers is they have all these. If you pick up your phone and you go on YouTube, you can access any one of these performances. Why don't they? And I say to myself, it's mind-boggling how we used to go to the library and put on these headphones and sit
Yes.
for hours and
Yes.
listen. Because who can afford? I couldn't afford records and
No.
or scores sometimes, and you would go to the library and pull out a score. But they have this access, and it's actually not even being used because people. You mentioned the name Pavarotti to somebody who's in their 30s. Okay, they would realize who he was. But if you go pre that, if you say Corelli or you say Gigli or you say Björling or you say, names like that, they don't have a clue, and it's a shame. Is it the teacher's responsibility to introduce people to that, or do you think it's just on the person themselves to grasp and try and dig deeper into the knowledge?
I think the teachers should. I think, well, we're kind of like doing express stuff these days,
Yeah.
like young people are getting express voice lessons, express coaching. It's like, hurry up and do it before you are too old for the age limit on the, competitions and the categories and such. Life is too fast now.
Yeah. I agree.
25 years ago, even, we had more time to spend looking into these things, living with what had been done in the golden age. It's so important to do that. Very important.
Do you find voices today of the caliber, or I shouldn't say that in a derogatory, at the fast pace where you just can't catch up? I mean, everybody and their brother has a master's today in music. Unfortunately, with a master's, and I use that term loosely, most people are not ready to go on the stage. They don't have that preparation. They don't have that maturity. And I was one of them. Believe me when I tell you, I was certainly one of those people. But as far as talent goes, is it an economic thing that people don't want to go into the career because 1 in 10,000 make it? I mean, I just don't know how to figure this out.
It's a multi-layered question and proposition that you bring up. It's so many factors. The real star talent is rare. We know that. We know that from our own generation.
It's always been, yeah.
Yes. And then the drive that it takes, the commitment that it takes with your life, with your finances.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive career to have.
Wow.
A very, very expensive career to pursue. So you have to have an overwhelming motivation and commitment to it. And I think a lot of the young singers today need to realize that, the goal is not necessarily the brass ring to sing at the Met, to sing in Vienna, to sing at La Scala. But hopefully after COVID, we'll see the surge again to just sing.
Yes.
To enjoy the fact that you are having a career, even if it's not at the level of the dream level. I often look back and say, if I had not been able to get to that level, I hope that I would have been happy,
Yes,
and
right.
I think I would have been. I feel I would have been happy to just sing in church.
Exactly.
Because I enjoy that.
Me too.
And I'm thankful for the blessings of singing with the great ones like Luciano and
Sure.
Placido and Aprile, Sharon Sweet, Debbie Voigt, all of these great singers that I got to perform with. And 27 countries in 25 years.
Wow. Yeah. That's impressive.
it's a blessing, but it took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of sacrifice. And a lot of singers today aren't necessarily willing, to make that kind of sacrifice.
My father, my father couldn't whistle. I mean, in tune, and he said that one of the smartest things to me that anybody's ever said about my singing. He said, you're singing the role. It's the same role if you sang it at the Met or you sang it in the ballpark. It's the same music. You sing it the same way. And, and again, my father had absolutely no musical talent or musical. My mother, on the other hand, yes, but my father, nothing. But what he said, because he was so astute and he was so intuitive, and he said, don't get frustrated. It'll come. And he was right. It eventually did. But I think that the problem today is that there's too much too soon, and we're always looking for these wunderkinds that are popping up. The problem is that the longevity of their career is not as extensive as some of the older singers, and and I blame this partially on the directors, because today everything is in HD, and if you're somebody who's wants to have that movie star look, you're not going to look at this picture right here and say, wow, that's Rock Hudson. So so I think that has a lot to do with it. And unfortunately, in my opinion, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of crap for this, is that the voice gets sacrificed and the art gets sacrificed.
Yes.
And my goal and my mission with Masterclass and having friends and people who were there and have done it, to show people and show these younger singers that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but there is a lot of work that has to be done before you get to put your foot on that stage to open your mouth. And Barbara, and I say this with all my heart, I love you to death. And you have always been an inspiration to me. You have been a mentor and a psychologist and a voice teacher to my wife especially, and me.
She's great. You're both great.
Well,
just
thank
great.
You. And I find it an honor and a privilege to call you a friend. And your artistry has always astounded me. And I thank you so much for being a part of Masterclass and the Masterclass family and my friend.
John, thank you. You couldn't be greater. You are the great one. And you and Joni have given a lot of joy and wonderful healing to this world with your music and your commitment to this art form. So I wish you health and happiness and continued joy in the music. And you give Joni a big, huge hug for me.
I will. And you do give Jack a hug for me.
All right, please. I will. Thank you, John.
Barbara, thank you so much.
Mwah.
I love you. Bye-bye.